Correlation does not mean causation. If people who did stuff on the internet memorized that and lived it out, the internet would be like cut in half. They'll say, well, the Bible's unique. It's from God. Okay. When two things are similar, it does not mean that those two things are the same or one thing came from the other. So go back to the flood stories. Well, let's pick a better example. Laws in the Old Testament. I actually got an email about 2 weeks ago of someone taking me to task, or they weren't directly taking me to task. They were asking the question, anticipating taking me to task. But it's like, I just read that somebody on the internet said that one of these laws, the laws about the Sabbath in the Torah, that this particular law came or can be found in Babylonia. So they're saying, you know, that invalidates that biblical law because it's not unique. What do you say? You know, and my answer was, well, that person's right. There is a Babylonian parallel to it. But the key question is, why would that be? Just because the one from Babylon and the one from the Hebrew Bible is similar doesn't mean they're the same. And it doesn't mean one came from the other. It's a witch, okay? I mean, they're assuming cause and effect. Correlation does not mean causation. If people who did stuff on the internet memorized that and lived it out, the internet would be like cut in half, okay? And just dumped. There's so much terrible, flawed thinking online. Just that one simple thing, correlation does not mean causation, would go a long way. Of course, you would expect laws to be the same in the Hebrew Bible, in Mesopotamia, and Egypt, because they all live in the same region. They're all the same people, you know, culturally. They all have the same lifestyles. Some are urban, some are like goat herders, some live out in the fields, some are pastoral nomads. They're going to run into the same problems, and plus people are just fallen, okay? Somebody's going to steal your ox, whether you live in Mesopotamia or Israel. So let's have a law about that. Oh, one came from the other. It's like, you know, just face palm, okay? No. People who live in a common region, a common culture, are going to have similar laws because the same problems are present. How simple is that? But it's like it never occurs to anybody. And it's because we have been taught that since the Bible is the Word of God, like it dropped from heaven. Like a law in the Bible can't be found anywhere else. Everything in the Bible has to be unique because it's from God. Really? I mean, how does that make sense? The Israelites are not Martians. Okay? They don't come from Venus. They didn't get their laws on Neptune. Okay? You know, they're earthlings and they all live in the ancient Near East. Okay? There's no reason to think that a law in the Torah cannot be similar to a law somewhere else of somebody living a couple hundred or even 1,000 miles away. Yes, absolutely. And he also would have known Akkadian well, which is actually the key. Akkadian was the lingua franca, just like English is today. It was the language of correspondence internationally. Mesopotamian laws were written in Akkadian. Moses probably had to read that stuff because he was a government official, and they probably made him read it in Akkadian school. Okay? This is what you're going to read today. Start translating, start transcribing. It's not the first time he's heard of it or seen it. And that goes across the board. For any literate scribe living in any era, if you hold that position, you must, it's part of your job description, you must deal with international correspondence and data, documents. This is part of your job. You are familiar with this material. again, there's no magic to it. It's context. It's about how the question is framed. If you're not familiar with the context, you don't really know how to sort of, what angle, by which to approach the question, where it makes the most sense. So the solution isn't, well, let's just not do that context thing. Let's just talk about Jesus, and Jesus is obviously the focus. And you're going to hear a lot about Jesus in the 15 weeks here. But that's not the solution, to things like this. That's what liberals do. Well, they do, and the data are there, so is denying reality a fruit of the Spirit? In other words, you can pretend that the parallels aren't there. You can pretend that the Dead Sea Scrolls have nothing to do with the New Testament. You can pretend that all day long, because that's what liberals do. They have their heads in that stuff. Wouldn't it be nice if a Bible believer had their head in that stuff? Wouldn't that be a good idea? Wouldn't it be nice if you had somebody who realized that, we got a lot of data here and it's real, and I'm a Christian, so it kind of matters, to be honest. But, I believe God is sovereign. God had this stuff discovered. So how do we think about this better? Wouldn't it be nice if you had a Bible believer master the material and then start thinking about it, rather than just pretending it's not there? So yeah, they do this stuff, and unfortunately, we don't have enough people who do.